Well, it's been 8 years since renowned conductor Karel Chichon performed on the Rock, and to everyone's excitement, he's here tonight with the European Symphony Orchestra. Karel Chichon, it's a long time since we've seen you. Tell us, how does it feel to be back on the Rock?
Well, it obviously brings back a lot of memories. Like you said, it's been 8 years since I was here last, and of course the cave particularly brings back a lot of memories because I've done a lot of concerts here, particularly in my youth, but also at the beginning of my career. So it's a kind of homecoming in many ways. It's also a personal one. So yeah, it brings an enormous amount of feelings back.
Well, you're actually heading off to a performance in Hong Kong very soon, but I suppose you couldn't cross continents without visiting the Rock. So how does it feel to be back for the Philharmonic? You're obviously one of the founders and still an artistic director, so it must be quite emotional, like you mentioned.
Well, yes, I mean, as I mentioned to you earlier, I was supposed to be in Shanghai. They had problems with COVID there. They imposed a very strict quarantine. I wasn't willing to do 10 days quarantine and wait for concerts to happen. And there was a concert here with the Gibraltar Philharmonic Society. It was happening, so I thought, why not do it myself? And that is exactly how it happened.
I think an understandable decision. Now, you've had some incredible achievements over the last few years. I think everyone here has been following your story closely, from New York to Gran Canaria. Mm-hmm. Could you share with us some of those experiences? How does it feel to grow in that way as a conductor?
Well, I mean, I think as a conductor you have the obligation to be universal. You have let's say, the requirement, in inverted commas, to adapt, to be very flexible. I speak 4 languages, and it's also about being flexible and adapting yourself to many different temperaments, because you don't treat and you don't speak to a German orchestra like you speak to one in New York, and you don't speak to a New York orchestra like you would speak to one in London. Every orchestra has, or every city, has its own dynamic, its own attitude towards the conductor, and you have to adapt, because at the end of the day what you want is to get the best result, and the best result is usually made, obviously, getting into the psychology of the players, because they are not machines, they're human beings.
Absolutely. So do you have a favorite orchestra just yet?
Well, my orchestra in Gran Canaria is certainly my favorite, because it's one that I have helped to develop, and obviously I feel very identified with them. I feel very identified with the government there. They subsidize culture very seriously and very generously. So obviously I feel very identified with that project, because I feel that there's really no limit to what we can do there.
Now, bringing it back to the Rock, where would you like to see Gibraltar's scene go?
Well, I think, with culture in Gibraltar, again, it has to start with the government. Of course, at the moment, there's a lot of cuts, necessary cuts from what I'm told, and it is only normal that you can't cut, health, you can't cut, certain other necessities before culture. But it is important to remember that really in culture, when people, and especially with the youth get associated with culture, we have a better society. And at the end of the day, all we want to do as people is grow to be better people. And culture helps you in that. It's not a slogan, it's really true. If people are curious with culture, they'll be curious with art, they'll be curious. And it's very interesting, because when you play in an orchestra, you learn to play with people. You learn to live with people. You learn to get along with people that maybe you don't particularly get along with, but you get along with musically. And that in many ways is a lesson for humanity, as it were, because at the moment a lot of countries don't get along with each other. They don't know how to speak to each other. But it is quite amazing when you think, for example, an orchestra like this one, where there's maybe 10 or 15 different nationalities, that they can speak one language. That in a way shows you what culture can do and what it should be about. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, before we go, we've obviously heard of some of your incredible achievements. Could you give us a sense of what's next for you?
Well, what's next for me is a lot of concerts in Gran Canaria, a Rigoletto in Berlin, in the Berlin State Opera, and basically, if I mention to you very, very honestly, I know I'm doing concerts in Hong Kong, but my diary is such that I don't really look too much in the future, because I have too much to do in the present. So at some point I'd look at what I'm doing in January, at some point I'd look at, it's all mapped out, of course. Musicians, especially in the classical musical world, and especially, in this division, let's call it that, we plan until 2026, 2027. So in fact, yesterday I received an offer from the Met for 2027, which is, it's very much ahead, but for us, it's a little bit just, behind the corner.
suppose we'll focus on the now, as many people here are looking forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for your time, Karel
Very well.
Chichon.